Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of this big guy right here. This is the Civivi Knives Imperium. But first off, before I go any further, I want to thank Civivi very much for sending this guy along. I actually reached out to them and said, hey, that looks like a pretty cool looking knife. You want to send it my way? And but as always, I sent them a disclaimer on my website. Told them I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk. They did still send it along. Nonetheless, we have to assume this is the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever. And I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature or quality of my review. Next thing, size comparison. This is actually a much bigger knife than I expected, right? Looking at this guy on Instagram, I thought this was going to be like a 3-inch front flipper sort of affair. But no, this is big. Here it is against the Ontario Rat number 2. Here it is against the Spyderco Delica. So we see here is this is actually a relatively large knife here. Here it is against the Spyderco PM2. And so what we see here is it's relatively thin in this domain, but it's still pretty damn long, right? Both in terms of blade and in terms of just overall approach to the world, right? So this is not a tiny knife. And then here it is against one of my very favorite Civivis at the moment. This is the Ortis, right? And we see it is bigger than the Ortis too. So there you go. Next thing, one quick note. This is actually not a factory edge, right? I put this edge on post-hoc, so to speak, not because the factory edge was bad, but because I was reviewing a sharpener, right? So, I just figured, I'll grab this one. It made sense, and also to just check the nature of the Nitro V, which is pretty good. Next thing, this is a knife that, predictably from Civivi, has a bunch of different versions, right? This particular version with the carbon fiber with the shredded gold in there, which is actually shredded gold leaf from the looks of it, is $90 out of the box, so to speak. And then you can get them in all different flavors of G10 for $70. Then finally, what the heck is this Civivi? Well, Civivi is a company based out of China. This is the budget brand of WE Knives, who has been a major OEM in the knife world for a good while now. So anyways, let's go ahead, jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of the little Imperium here. So on the good side, to start with, I do kind of like the gold shred carbon fiber, right? It's a little ridiculous. It's a little bougie, but at the same time, by God, it looks kind of neat, right? Because you get the shreds of carbon fiber, you get a little bit of gold, you get a little resin in between. Yeah, I think it ends up looking kind of cool, right? And it's a little bit different in a world that's a lot of same. So you might not like it, but luckily they got other options. There's a silver shred in there too, which looks kind of cool. Next thing, this is a pretty nice design, if not a little bit middle of the road, but it's very thin, it's very svelte, there's not a whole lot, there's not a whole lot to it, but as a result, it ends up being, well, basically good, right? There's not too much wrong with it. It's a very solid little design, and it's pretty attractive, too. It feels pretty fast on the table, so to speak. Next thing, this has a pretty recessed and countersunk clip. What I mean by that is if we take a look at the clip here, we see that it really doesn't stick out at all above the scale here. There might be a little tiny bit of prominence there, but by and large, the clip is flush with the scales, which means that you have the full height of the clip here for your pants pocket to go in there and makes this guy take in and out of the pocket very, very straightforwardly. Compared with other companies that will often have screws and such inside that area, this is a very nice thing. It's a good detail. Like to see it very much. Although it is not, by the way, a lefty-friendly clip. You cannot flip this knife around and carry it lefty, which is a shame. Next thing, this guy is relatively lightweight. We see here is that, dimension-wise, we are looking here around 3.5 inches here. I don't think there's a way to measure this over 3.5, no matter how much the cop dislikes you. But nonetheless, we can go on ahead and throw this guy in the scale, and we see that this is coming in at the 2.9 ounces, which is way under an ounce an inch, which is good, right? I appreciate that. It is a pretty lightweight knife. It disappears pretty well in the pocket. Next thing, this has a lanyard hole, which is the very best thing a lanyard hole can be, which is hidden, right? You don't see it unless you need it, and if you need it, it's there. That's a beautiful thing. I appreciate it very much. Next thing, this guy has 2 different opening options to it. First off, you got a set of thumb studs, which right there, and not, by the way, in the slicing path, which I appreciate. And you also have this little protuberance on the front here, which is a front flipper tab, which means you can open it this way as well, or maybe even reach around the top if you got really long fingers. But it is a very comfortable deployment, either in front flip or in thumb stud mode. That's a beautiful thing, and honestly, I'd like to see more of that, right? Give us the choice. Have both. It works great. So to me, that's a beautiful thing. And the action on it, by the way, is pretty solid. There's really no complaining about the action here. I could probably be adjusted a little bit better if I was able to get in there. We'll talk about that one later. But nonetheless, the action on this guy out of the box is fine. It works just fine. So to me, all of that is the good, is that the action is pretty solid. It's got 2 opening options, a hidden lanyard hole. It's pretty lightweight with a recessed countersunk clip, with a nice design line, and the gold shred carbon fiber is kind of neat. On the great side to me is the blade of this guy. This has a great blade. The steel on this guy is Nitro V, which is an absolutely, where does it say that? It's around here somewhere. Either way, this is a Nitro V steel. Oh, yeah, right here. Nitro V steel, which is a very nice steel, and actually I was pretty impressed with it when sharpening it up. It wasn't any particular slouch, so that's good. It has a very nice little swedge on there, giving it a little bit of extra look to it. It's got a very nice thin edge on this guy, and a very nice shape with some flat, some belly, a nice pokey tip here. This is just a very, very nice little blade. I appreciate it very much, and it makes for a great cutting tool, which is, well, the best thing that a knife should be, right? A great cutting tool. So the blade on this guy is absolutely great. On the bad side, to start with, this is personal, but I really thought this guy was coming in smaller, and honestly, I think it would be very compelling coming in smaller. If they were to shrink this whole thing down to like 3.25 or 3 inches, I think this would be pretty cool, right? And when I got it out of the box, it's like, holy crap, I didn't realize this is much bigger than I thought it was. And as a result, it ends up being almost a little awkwardly big, right? It's a little thick. It's not the end of the world. And I know a lot of people, oh my God, bias. But at the same time, yeah, it was bigger than I expected, and it feels a little bigger than needed. Next thing, speaking of more than needed, the price on this guy is higher than I think is merited, right? They're talking $70 for the G10 versions and $90 for the gold shred carbon fiber. Look, that one I feel a little better about because at least there's an interesting material. But $70 for this in G10 feels a little high, right? Maybe $15, $20 snuck in there someplace. I feel like Civivi lately has been feeling overly comfortable and pricing accordingly, right? They are a company who really won people's hearts by really aggressively pursuing value, right? $40 or $50 knives that were like, wow, this is good. When you're getting up into $70 for the same thing, I think someone else might come along and Civivi them if they keep this kind of pricing up. So, guys, remember, you're really not hot enough to start getting crazy with pricing. You might want to remember the value roots and kind of push that a little bit more aggressively, because this isn't aggressively value. Next thing, I don't really care for this line. This is not but there are no other really strong straight lines on this knife, and then they've just thrown in a random look. And looking at it, it's like, what, did the bandsaw slip? What's the problem here? I don't get it. I feel like this just would have been more attractive without the in there. I'm nitpicking here, but it's a thing. Next thing, if you look at the G10 models, there does not appear to be much contouring on those. This is very nicely contoured across, whereas the G10 models seem like they're kind of flat on this side. I get that they're trying to go to a lower price point, but dude, no, it's too expensive to cut corners there. The contouring does help ergonomically speaking. Next thing, I'm not really a fan of the black painted liners. This is, again, I'm nitpicking a little bit, but given that Civivi has done such nice liners before, this is like the Civivi Backlash. I'm sorry, this is the Praxis, but still, I feel like these scales with these liners would have been quite nice. I think it would have been a really nice detail here. And the black painted always comes off feeling a little bit, I don't know, a little cheapy or something like that. So I'm not a huge fan of that. Next thing, the clip on this guy is very tall and ends up feeling like a hot spot, both here and here. So ergonomically, it's just not as good as I had hoped it would be. And I think they could probably address that by going to either a shallower carry clip that sits a little bit lower, or just changing some of the just tweaking the angles. Either way, not a big fan of that. And then finally, on the bad side, the screws on this guy, and I'm going to see if I can zoom in and show you this, but the screws on this guy are very, very shallow. What I mean by that is not that they, watch reality TV like, well, I do. Whoops. But anyways, instead, they are there's very, very little vertical surface here for contact with the driver. And as a result, when I tried to take this guy apart, not only was this guy thread locked shut, which, hey, I wonder what the ugly is going to be, but the drivers kept slipping and slipping. This is something I've seen Civivi doing lately, and it just drives me a little crazy, right? I hope they get a screw supplier that's willing to give a little depth there, because it makes it much more difficult to deal with. So those shallow screws are definitely bad and prove to be a major problem with this particular knife. So to me, that's the bad. The screws are getting a little shallow. The clip is a hot spot. I'm not a big fan of the black painted liners here. It's got this random line in there. It's a little pricier than I think is merited, and it's a little bigger than I expected. On the ugly front, unfortunately, they appear to have thread locked this knife shut. I don't know whether given I did not go in there with, like trying to heat it up and whatnot, because I don't know how this resin's going to respond to that. But nonetheless, you might be able to get it open, but between these really, really shallow screws, which make it very easy for your driver to come popping out again and to kill the driver, No, this guy was just not openable. They either used too much thread locker, they, over tightened at the factory. There is something wrong here, which means that I was not able to disassemble this knife successfully due to a combination likely of thread locker and bad screws. So to me, that's very, very ugly and, is something that I really don't care for. Final conclusion, look, I feel like this is kind of yet another fine knife from Civivi, right? It's got nice materials. It's got a good design. It's got a good clip mount, lightweight build. It's got that hidden lanyard hole, two opening actions, two opening actions, I suppose, a solid action, and a great blade. It is a little bit bigger. The price isn't super value, right? The line is bizarre. The back painted line is, clip's a hot spot. The screws are not great, and the knife is thread locked shut. My final conclusion on this guy, I was initially very optimistic about this, like, oh, that looks great. Super excited, but it kind of felt like a little bit of a death of a thousand cuts, right? A number of little annoyances that all add up to this feeling like, And a price, unfortunately, is the biggest issue here, that is just not strong enough to make me look past them. If this were a $40 knife, I'd be like, yes, good. I can live with everything that they did here for $40, but by the time they're towards the top of their pricing range, they really need to be toward the top of their quality range, right? And so I kind of feel like the final conclusion here is, well, they're not going to be super strong either way. It is a knife that I freely admit a number of people will probably enjoy, and, especially if you love the look, you don't mind the price, etc., then you know what? Okay. It could very easily be somebody's one and only knife, and they'd probably be very happy with it. At some level, my feelings here are me being too damn familiar with too many knives, even from Civivi. Seeing other things on their lineup like the Ortis, like the Praxis, like all those other things that are just like, wow, really, really good work. And so I'm being really, really picky. Heck, I'm probably being a little imperious. But it's also not Civivi's best work. I'm being honest with you here. They are a company that has had a lot of strong hits. They have made some knives that are really, really good and pushing value levels that are really, really amazing. And this really isn't it. It makes their middle-of-the-pack stuff seem a little bit further behind, especially when it's towards the top of the pack in pricing. So I'd love to see some iteration, addressing some of these little details here, or maybe a price drop, which makes me feel like, I don't really care at that price, right? But either way, final conclusion is, it's fine. I think a lot of folks will enjoy it, but I'm not entirely willing to recommend it your way. So I hope this has been interesting to you and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.